Good morning, everybody. I'm Taylor Johnson. I'm here with Ben Horton of Monarch Title. We're going to talk about settlement companies and title companies and what your role in the home purchase process is. Hello, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. I appreciate it.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Monarch Title and what your role in the purchase process is.
Absolutely. We are the title company and escrow agent.
Okay.
So that has a couple different meanings. So once your buyer has identified a house, a contract is written and accepted, a copy of that contract typically goes to the mortgage company if they're using a loan, and then a copy would come to the title company. If there's an earnest money deposit, which there typically is, we
Right.
often hold that again in escrow as the escrow agent. And then we do basically research at that point. What research are we doing? We're researching to make sure the seller actually owns the house. Has the seller paid all of their IRS taxes, Maryland taxes, Prince George's County taxes, as we're in Prince George's County,
Condo fees.
condo fees, HOA dues.
Yeah.
We're making sure there's no liens against the property because, of course, the buyer wants to buy the house free and clear of any and all liens and encumbrances.
Right.
So that's the research that we're doing. And again, we're doing that in about a 30-day period. And we're working with the lender to get all the paperwork together. At the end, we'll all come together, buyer, seller, and we'll execute the documents, transferring ownership over to the new owner. And then again, if they're using a mortgage company, we'll execute all the loan documents as well. So we are the title company, which again, checking the title, and the escrow agent receiving the funds in order to disperse the file after closing.
And I guess something that I hadn't really even thought of till just now, but I noticed that you do it like every time I've seen you execute the documents. You also are the notary.
Yes.
That makes the documents official, right?
That's correct. So several of the documents need to be notarized. Examples would be the deed.
Right.
The deed's the legal document that transfers the ownership from the seller to the buyer. That document does get recorded and sent to the courthouse, so it's a public record that the world knows who the new owner is. And then several of the loan documents also need to be notarized. Typically the deed of trust, any affidavits that the bank has sent over will also be signed and notarized. And it makes sense for us to be the notary since we're there as, again,
Right.
the settlement agent, the escrow agent, with everybody and all the paperwork.
Okay, excellent. And then what role does the title company have after settlement? Because I know there's some sort of behind the scenes stuff that happens there too.
Absolutely. Maryland and DC are what we call, and Virginia for that matter, are what we call wet settlement states, meaning all the funds have to be at the table at closing. But then there are things that happen after closing. So the buyers leave with their keys, they're excited. We have to then get, typically nowadays, a wire to the seller for their proceeds, wires to the real estate brokers, but then a deed has to get recorded that I mentioned earlier, and along with the deed, there'll be a deed of trust and a couple affidavits, such as, is the buyer a first-time home buyer? All of that gets packaged up by our post-closing department and sent to record. What is record? Essentially, it's the courthouse where they keep track of all the ownership of real property. Now, of course, all of that is done electronically today, so there isn't a messenger that actually runs to the courthouse typically. It gets filed electronically.
In the old days you sent a courier?
Nope. In the old days we sent a courier, and I will say, even today, there are certain transactions do require what we call a manual recording. We have to send someone to the courthouse.
Interesting.
Yep.
Huh. All right. And so that's kind of what happens and why a title company is important. How important is it, would you say, to choose a title company that's locally based versus one that's national? Or one that's, if you're buying in, let's say buying in Hyattsville, you want one that's based in Hyattsville, not one that's based in Virginia, for example.
I think it makes sense to use local companies. There's lots of nuances even between the different counties in Maryland. Montgomery County has, this little bit of a tweak of a language they want on their intake sheets. Prince George's County has a slightly different tweak on some of the language that they want on their intake sheets. And I think knowing those local customs are vital.
Mhm.
Of course, I do business in DC, and we know all of the ins and outs of the District of Columbia, and then Monarch does have separate offices in Virginia, which I usually defer the files there, McLean and Old Town, because again, they know the different things there. For instance, in Old Town Alexandria, well, anywhere in Virginia, you have to be on record before you disperse the file.
Okay.
And in Old Town, on a Friday, they basically stopped doing, the court being they, stopped receiving the intakes at a certain time in the mid-afternoon. So anything that's closes in the mid to late afternoon in Virginia will not go to record to the following day. And so our office in Old Town tries not to schedule things late on Fridays,
Because they know that.
knowing that they can't get on record, and that then sellers will be saying, "Where's my money?"
Uh-huh.
And that's what we're always trying to avoid, is getting
Interesting.
everyone's proceeds out the door.
Right. Huh. Okay. So that's something I didn't know. But another thing that I know as a buyer's agent in Virginia is that the contracts are enormously different. And they're like, in Maryland, you've got like 45 pages, and in Virginia, it's maybe like 12. It's like, so I can just imagine that on the title side and filing, all that sort of stuff, there's big differences too in how you do it. So knowing those and understanding those differences.
Yep.
I do a fair amount of work in Baltimore as well, and I always use a Baltimore company because Baltimore has so much ground rent and all that stuff that's a whole nother animal that people don't really necessarily deal with every day in other places. So
No, I mean, I can tell you horror stories. You know, we do Baltimore as a favor to our favorite agents, because Baltimore can be more difficult. There's issues of ground rent, there's issues of water bills, there's liens that are applied by the city to encourage houses that are vacant not to be vacant,
right.
and get broken windows and long grass and then critters. And a lot of title companies will close a deal in Baltimore City and not have gone to the city to check all of that first. And all of a sudden you have a new owner who's got like a lien from the city for some reason. So it's really important to use, I think, regionally. You can use regional companies that are familiar with specific areas, and you know, and not use companies that, you know, then don't know how to get to record because they didn't fill out the intake sheet correctly,
Right.
they didn't click the right box, and it keeps getting rejected, and so forth. And so it's always nice to kind of have a local expert.
Right. And I've had a title company that actually slowed down the deal. We were in a foreclosure process, and we were using the one that was recommended by the seller, and they were a mess. And my client eventually, we were maybe a month and a half, 2 months late on the deal, and there was another screw up, and my client's like, "That's it. I don't want to go forward with this." She was just so frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I always appreciate about Monarch is you communicate very clearly. You have a system in place that it works and follows the procedure pretty well. And I know when we start with you and you tell us you can do it, we're going to be on time, and my clients are going to be happy, and that's really important.
No, I mean, absolutely. At the end of the day, you know, people often say what differentiates one title company from the next, and it really comes down to service. We're all selling the same apples at about the same costs.
Yeah.
Because nobody wants to price themselves out of the market against their competitors. So really, you're getting this same product as far as what you're purchasing financially. So the question is, did you have a good experience? Did it go off on time? Was there communication? Did the buyer and seller know when to be, where to be, you know, etc. And I think that's important as the whole process, because as you know, working with an agent, you want the process to go from A to Z smoothly.
Right.
And that's what the buyers want. That's what the seller wants ultimately too, is to know that, hey, we had a nice little product here, everybody's happy, and then we move on to the next chapter of life.
Yeah, I mean, it's stressful enough. You don't need to have the title company add to it, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, again, I'm Taylor Johnson. I'm with Keller Williams Capital Properties. I'm part of the Eng Garcia team. I'm here with Ben Horton at Monarch Title, and I hope this was informative to you. If you found it useful, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, reach out to Ben or me. Our contact information will be below. Thank you so much, Ben.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Appreciate
Taylor.
your time.
Pleasure.